right, welcome everyone to a new live stream episode of Anabaptist World. We're joined tonight with Ari Ali. Hey Danny, how are you doing tonight?
I'm
Hi
doing
Ari, how are you all doing?
good.
Thanks. Doing all right. Hey, Juan.
Yeah. All right, hi.
Should we remind people who we are? Is that
Yeah,
okay?
yeah, yeah.
So I'm Danny Klotz, and I'm the Executive Director of Anabaptist World. I'm joining from Goshen.
Yeah, and my name is Juan Moya. I'm from Gainesville, Florida. Well, I'm originally from Colombia, but living in Gainesville, Florida, and I'm the digital strategist of Anabaptist World. And we are joined tonight with Ari Ali. Is that how you pronounce your last name?
It's a great job. Thank you.
Okay. Ari is a Yemeni-American filmmaker and producer whose work explores overlooked stories at the intersection of culture, history, and identity. Raised between the Middle East and the United States, she's drawn to narratives that reconnect people with forgotten places, moments, and roots.
Her current feature documentary, Ben Between Africa, follows a 7-year journey to uncover her late uncle's final letter. The film explores themes of family separation, the legacy of evangelical missions, and the healing potential of reconnection across generations. Ari's producing credits include social impact campaigns and large-scale artistic collaborations, such as projecting and projecting, yeah, endangered species on the Empire State Building for racing extinction, a multi-city campaign with Freedom First spotlighting violence against journalists, global climate initiatives with the United Nations, and producing Fiat Lux, a Vatican-commissioned public art installation that lit up St. Peter's Basilica as a call to action for the planet.
To Ari, storytelling is a tool for empathy, connection, and change, a way to better understand the world and help shape it for the future. Now we're going to present the trailer of her latest film, Ben Between Africa.
Dear Mommy
Dear
and Dad,
parents.
Dear folks,
Dear Ben, I really want to know what happened to you. This mysterious uncle I know so little about.
He was a real knowledge seeker.
He was very into storytelling.
His mind was just always going.
I think he would be fascinated by you.
Do you know the specifics around how Ben died?
That's always been kind of a mystery.
Is there a connection between your death, the final letter you wrote, and this feeling of being fractured as a family? My mom and her siblings grew up in Ethiopia.
There was a lot of opposition towards missionaries on the part of the Orthodox Church, But the emperor, he knew what they could do.
All the missionaries said, we just send our kids off to boarding school. And so there we were just abandoned.
At an early age, when you're sent away like that, it affects you the rest of your life.
When you guys came to America, both you and Ben immediately wanted to go back.
Yeah, we were like fish out of water.
please write soon. I'm homesick for Ethiopia.
He missed it. He wanted to go back to Ethiopia. So much of who he was from there.
So the late 1960s and early 70s was really a time of student revolution. But by the time Ben returns, he's now seen as someone who's no longer welcomed.
Times don't change for you. You have to walk with the times. So he didn't do that.
Known as Ben to his friends.
We knew you between Africa.
My dear Ben, you were real. You are family. When I started this search, I hadn't considered the loss I might feel.
Where the search for the truth is greater than the fear, you're going to bring healing to that whole system. And that's what you're doing.
Remembering is so important. I'm so glad you came.
Well, that was a moving trailer. Thank you, Ari, for providing that.
This is where we stop to clap and everyone joins us. Well,
Yeah,
Ari, thank you so much for joining us today. We're so honored to have you. Please tell us more about yourself and a little bit more even about your connection to Anabaptism.
Yeah, so just a little bit about my background. I've been working in the film industry now for about 20 years. I went to film school, and most of my career has been helping other people make their projects. So I usually come in as a producer, a creative producer, someone who comes in and just helps see other people's visions through. But then when this project fell in my lap, I felt like this is my story to tell. And it took about 7 years to make this documentary. The first 5 years were mostly focused on research for me. One of the very first things that happened is I discovered a ton of boxes in my grandmother's brother's attic, and it was a farmhouse that she grew up in. And so I found all these boxes and brought them home with me. And then I spent like a year just going through them, reading all the letters. And then through that, I made a list of people to interview. And I focused on my grandparents' generation, so the parents, the missionaries that went to Ethiopia. And then I slowly made my way down to Ben's generation. And I went to Ethiopia and filmed the Ethiopians and got to retrace my family's footsteps. And so it was about 2 or 3 years, it's almost actually 5 years of shooting and research, and then 2 years of editing. So this whole project took about 7 years, but it was deeply personal project, and there was no way to rush it. Like, the film took the time it took to make. And one thing I'll say that has really struck me in all the screenings I've been doing this year is everyone who worked on so it wasn't a big team. It was myself and an editor. We did 90% of the work. And then we brought on an amazing composer to do the music, which was which was huge for the film. It really brought out the emotion. And then we brought on a sound designer, and that brought richness, and a color corrector. But we really didn't have a big team. Most of the shooting was done by me. And then the editor came in year 5. So it was a real labor of love. And most people, everyone who worked on the project, it was a passion project. So I got a huge rate discount, lots of volunteer time. And I think you really feel it in the film. I think everyone who worked on it, it moved them, and they wanted to work on it for that reason.
The next question is, what drew you to filmmaking?
So I grew up in Yemen, and in Yemen we had one show a week that we could watch that was like appropriate for children. Everything else was just like news. And my sisters and I would do everything in our power to get our mom home in time so that we could watch that one show. So this is pre-YouTube, this is pre-TikTok or Instagram, and we had to like go to the TV and watch that show at that time. And then we also had VHS tapes that were, we had like one VHS tape a year. So we would watch that one film until we could no longer make that tape play anymore. And so I didn't have that much exposure to media until I moved to America, and we went to the movie theater, we watched the film, and I remember everyone else talking about the film, like the actors, like they were real people. And I was just really struck by the fact that there had to be a team behind the camera making the film. And I was 13 when I had that thought. And then just from that day on, I knew I was going to be a filmmaker. My first kind of like introduction to filmmaking was photography. And then I led from photography to filmmaking. So it's been something I've been interested in and passionate about since I was 13.
Well, we had the privilege to watch the private screening of this film, and it sparked many thoughts into my mind just relating to the story myself. I was born in Colombia. I was a missionary kid in Ecuador, and being in a new culture. I also lived in Costa Rica, United States, Mexico. And the topic that was touched in this film is how that affects kids in different ways, right? I know for myself, growing up, I had a lot of traumas that later showed up in my adulthood because of not having a place to ground myself in because of so much trouble. So can you give the listeners today a general overview of the film and maybe some of your hopes as you went into its creation?
Yeah, so I'll begin by saying that I'm an outsider. So not only was I raised in Yemen and then came to America when I was like 10, but I also wasn't raised, my mom is Mennonite, but I was not raised Mennonite myself. My dad is Muslim, but I wasn't raised Muslim. So when I first started working on this project, I had the privilege of being mostly an outsider to this world. So like I had that outsider's perspective. And I also had some of the outsider's ignorance, which allowed me to ask questions or to research things that maybe to other people would be obvious. And it also allowed me to have an innocence. So some things that maybe other missionary kids know not to talk about, or is this understood from the upbringing? None of that was there for me. So I was able to kind of come in completely with a clean slate and see everything fresh for the first time. So not only am I not Mennonite, but I also wasn't raised in MK. So so a lot of in the film, I narrate a letter to Ben, but I don't share any of my personal opinions outside of my family because it's not the childhood I had. So anyone who shares an opinion about the experience, there's someone who was raised in that way, whether they were raised overseas or they were like an MK or they were a missionary themselves. So I kind of let those people, hold that weight of sharing their experiences, and then I create the world for it. So the way that this film came to be is that in 2017, I was at my cousin's wedding, and it was the night before her wedding, and this guy who I didn't know asked my mom, like, did you get one of Ben's final letters? And Ben is my mom's older brother that died mysteriously in 1975 when he was only 25 years old. And growing up, I didn't hear anything about Ben. And it wasn't until I heard about this letter that I saw an opportunity to start researching who he was. And it was through the search for this letter that I was able to dig into my family's time. It's like one thing led me to another. One thing was a cookie crumb to the next thing. And the search of the letter is the thing that keeps the film moving forward. But we go into all these little pockets. So we explore what it's like to grow up a missionary kid in Ethiopia in the mid-century. We explore the politics of Ethiopia that created the cultural and political environment for my family to be there. And then we go into like Ben's college years and Peace Corps, and then what the third culture kid experience is like to come to America after being raised overseas and not belonging to either world. So Ben Between Africa, the title, it's literally said in the film. There's a moment, a really poignant moment in the film where someone says, we knew Ben between Africa. But I think for a lot of MKs and TCKs, that between is that eternal search for where do you belong? How do you build roots? How do you get grounded when your life is all about movement and belonging in cultures that aren't necessarily your cultural heritage place that you come from?
I think, from the moment I heard about your project, I was so excited to share this with our audience. I think so many people, whether they're Mennonite or not, even if they have had relatives, grandparents, I don't know, who were missionaries, aunts or uncles, can come to this and relate and see themselves. And whenever there's a project that depicts North American Mennonites, I kind of am like, how are they going to represent us? Just because, at least in the U.S., there's, the stereotypes, and usually when they say Mennonite, people think of Amish. And I guess because I'm not that, I feel a little sensitive. But you did such a beautiful job in Ben Between Africa of really simply giving nuance and also fine definition of what a Mennonite faith and experience can look like. And, as you've named already, this is such a deeply close project for you. And so I wonder if you could speak to some of the complexities of writing and directing a film that's just, it's family. This is so close to your heart.
Yeah, there's my editor and I went to a workshop on personal documentaries, and the guy that was leading the workshop has made several personal documentaries. And he said, if the protagonist's head is not on the chopping block, like if you don't have something big to lose, we're not interested in as an audience. And then after that workshop, my editor turned to me and was like, we got to put your head on the chopping block. And I was just like, and that was my biggest fear. So my biggest fear was, and the thing I avoided for most of the project was, how do I tell this film without affecting my relationship with my mom? Yeah. So, my mom was Ben's younger sister. She's the one who I had the most questions around, like, how did his death affect her? And then how did that affect the family ongoing? And why didn't we talk about it? And it's such a simple thing when it's not your family, but when it is your family, that relationship is on the line.
Right.
And so one of the things that I did very early on is I brought my mom into the process on a daily basis. So on a daily basis, I would call her and we would discuss the letters I was reading or the interviews that I had. And so she was very aware of what I was learning when I was learning it. And it took us almost the entire time of making the film before we sat down and we had our interview. And it was really scary for both of us because I didn't know how she was going to react from me asking her directly, like, why didn't we talk about Ben growing up? And I also didn't know the long-term effects of our relationship. And one of my fears was putting this film out into the world. Would it destroy my relationship with my mom? And if it did, it wasn't worth it. You know, like that relationship is sacred. But what ended up happening, so there was a lot of sleepless nights. There was a lot of anxiety. There was a lot of like fear about putting certain like interviews in, like how would it affect? And it was my relationship with my mom was my number one concern. Like the rest of the story does touch on some touchy subjects, but I definitely felt like those were a little bit more removed. The personal story aspect was the one that I stayed up and lost sleep over. But I think because I brought her in and folded her into the process, she got to watch a lot of the rough cuts. Yeah. And she was the first person to see the film before anyone else outside of me and the editor saw it. So I got permission to look for the letter, and then I got her blessing once it was done to put it out into the world. And I think there's still been surprises for us. Like she's been to some of my screenings, and I think that there's been moments where it's been very emotional because it's her story and she's sitting right in the middle of the audience.
Yeah.
But the process of making this film has absolutely brought us closer. It's easier to talk about hard things. And then she also can't get away with anything anymore because I read every letter she's ever written from the time she was 5, you know. She'll say things now like, oh, that was 1972. And I'm like, well, it wasn't 1972. And those people actually weren't there. So I had like and it's probably every parent's nightmare that their kid would read all their letters, but it did allow us to have, like, I know all her friends. And so, for example, when I was in Ocean and I went to the relief cell, I was texting with my mom's boarding school classmates about being at the relief cell and sending them pictures of the quilts. So it has allowed me to become a part of my mom's life in a way that I wasn't before.
I'm just considering what it would be like for my children in I don't know how many years to be like, Mom, you wrote this letter. And honestly, with social media, they might be able to do that.
Yeah.
Really, truly. Is there anything in the process that was just so surprising for you?
Yeah, I would say that the biggest surprise for me was the warmth with which I was invited into people's homes and lives in the process of making this film. So almost everyone got a cold call or email or a Facebook message from me saying, oh, by the way, someone from 50 years in your past, like I am the niece of this person who died in 1975. Like, would you be willing to talk to me about your memories about him and about that time? And over again, I was really surprised at people's willingness to just really open up and share. And then what I learned through that process is that like people want to be asked about their lives. And people are really moved by interest. And I think the thing I came away from it is that like giving someone your attention is one of the biggest gifts you can give another person, and like asking them thoughtful questions about how things affected them. We're so scared to do it because we don't want to be nosy and we don't want to pry. But more often than not, I felt like people were so generous with their time, with their hospitality, with inviting a total stranger in, and then with a few, hours, you're friends, and then you're invited to dinner at their house. The warmth with which people took me in, and the way I describe it is I feel like I had this entire community around me of Mennonites and Ethiopians that were my grandparents' friends and my mom's like classmates that have always been in my zeitgeist, but I didn't have the lights turned on. And then when I started making this film, I feel like it was turning on the lights and all of a sudden I had this whole orchestra of community around me. And it really made me feel, it allowed me to feel like I have roots and I have connection to a community that was waiting for me to show up and waiting for me to ask questions. And like, it's, there is a moment where you're about to write an email and you're like, this person doesn't want to be bothered, but more often than not, I got very positive responses. I can't even think of one response I got that wasn't like, yeah, come, let's talk about this. So I think just people's generosity with their time, and then how meaningful it is to give someone like your time and your attention, like, and how that I think we walk around with blinders on, and this was like an experience of, this film gave me an excuse to kind of open up the blinders and see who's all around.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ari. I didn't mention this to you, but I'm also a filmmaker. This year, I was well with another colleague. We were able to shoot a film in LA actually
Nice.
about immigration and the hardships that immigrants, Latino immigrants, go uh, by coming here to the United States. So I'm interested in some of the production details for this film. How you mentioned that this film took you about 7 years, but what was the process like? Um, were you maybe you planned ahead and said, well, this year I'm gonna have the goal to shoot this and this and this other year I'm gonna promote the work, or what, do you have any sponsorship for this work, some funding, because I know filmmaking is expensive, right? So what does that look like for you in your project?
I will say that the next time I do a project like this, I will do everything that you just said. I will have a plan. I will have a strategy. I will know what I'm shooting when. It will all be very well thought out. But no, this time it was, I could only see 1 foot ahead of me at a time. And so every single thing that happened, I could have never planned it. And so the first thing that I did is when I went to the attic to look to see what was there is I brought a camera. And I went and I bought a Sony A Mark II camera. And like that camera really sucks with focus, but I didn't know that at the time. But I brought a camera, I brought a mic, and I just started filming myself. And then everything from there grew grassroots. So like buying labs, buying a boom mic, like just buying a second camera, like watching my footage and learning from it. Because I've never worn so many hats. So I had to be the director, the producer, I had to be the camera person, the sound person. And by wearing all those hats, I was able to keep the costs really low. So most often the only costs I had were my own overhead. So like getting somewhere. So the travel costs, the food costs, but I didn't have to pay a crew. And there's benefits and downsides to that, obviously. But the whole process of making this film was a process of discovery. And oftentimes I would know what to do next based on what just happened. Like someone would say something and I would say, oh, I need to go shoot this next. And for 5 years, all I did was research and collect interviews. And through that process, I kind of built up my content and had a sense of what I had. And then the film really did not come together until I hired my editor. And so my editor was someone who I work with in my professional life, and I'm a creative producer in my professional life. And we were working on a commercial together, and I really just liked him as a human. I thought he had a lot of like soul. And so I interviewed him. We got along really well. We did a couple test edits, and we were a nice balance. And then that's when the story came together. I did not know the story I was going to tell until we started editing. And there weren't grants. Like I didn't get a single grant that I applied for. I got part of 2 fellowships. I found that with this project, I don't think grantors thought that it was timely enough of a project to give funding to, that there were other projects that really related to things that were happening in America that felt more urgent. And I agree with them. There's probably a lot of things happening because this was during George Floyd and the Me Too movement. Like a lot of things were happening, the first Trump administration. So there was a lot of films that were really worthy of those grants. And I feel like this is a great film, but I feel like the topic wasn't urgent enough to get funding that year.
The timing, yeah.
Timing is everything. And I do feel like next time around, I'll be a lot more strategic and a lot more focused on where I get my funding from, because this film was self-funded. But it felt worth it to me because it felt like this is a story that needed to be told. And if I was really smart about it, I could do it without it completely like bankrupting me. And so now there's like, now's the other side of it where I'm distributing the film. So I'm out in the world showing it to people. And I understand that what I'm doing is not only trying to recoup some of the expenses, but I'm also proving to this community that I can make films about us, and then that they'll be really good stories. And hopefully in the future that will allow me to make more films that get funded.
Right. Well, yeah. I was wondering because I saw in a lot of the credits there was I mean, you say it was basically you and a small crew, but there's a lot of people editing sound. You mentioned that earlier. Who else do you have close to you that was contributing directly to the film?
Yeah. So the film was really just 5 people. So it was me, my editor, We had an amazing composer, a sound designer. We had someone who did the titles. And then we had someone who did some visual effects cleanup. But that was really, it was really, and I actually love this style of filmmaking. And I don't know if I want my career to grow to a place where I have a huge team, because the fact that we were small and nimble, like it was really a creative environment. And it was like everyone really got to own their part. And I loved how close we all got in the process of making. I mean, my editor and I worked together for 2 years nonstop, talking every day. It was a very close relationship. And it was the closeness of our relationship that allowed the heart of the film to come through. Right. And I wouldn't want a giant company behind me, because the film would get lost in the system. But the long list that you saw, those are all the people I interviewed. So I interviewed like 65 people. So I interviewed a ton of people, but I think at the end we have maybe like 13 people in the film, but I think I interviewed close to 65. And there are so many people that just kept showing up over and over again to support me. Like they were just so generous with their support, and they're continuing to support me. Stuart Showalter was a huge support in helping me helping me very early on with interviews, leading me to people, giving me really important information. And then also right now I just had a screening in Goshen, and a lot of people came up to me and were like, Stuart Showalter is the reason why I know about this. And then his wife, Shirley Showalter, wrote a really beautiful review of the film. And so there's a lot of people like that who, Peg Ingle, like I could just name so many people, the Kebedas, Nagash and Janet Kebeda, like so many people just they put me up in their house in Ethiopia for a month, let me interview them for hours and hours and hours. And so there's so many people that just kept like contributing time. Peter Dula was a huge reason why I had a successful screening in Harrisonburg. Carolyn Yoder, like the names could keep going, but these are people who, like, the amount of emails I emailed them and the amount of times they responded so generously with their time and attention and connections and referrals, the reason why I had that thank you list is that these people like just kept being supporters of this film and continue to be supporters of the film. And I keep waiting for someone to be like, no, I'm good, we did the film, like let's move on, but that doesn't seem to happen. People keep asking me like, can I post it on my Facebook, like how do you need help? And we've had a few people in the film pass away since the making of the film. And that has been an interesting process. I've never had to watch a film and then realize that the people who are in it have passed. And so because this film took so long, lives have drastically changed during the making of it. And it does feel like a family was formed and a community was formed around the process of making it.
Yeah.
No.
Well, just want to say I'm joining on my phone, and I'm afraid I can't find a charger very close to me. If I go away, I'm very sorry. I did not try to leave. But the last question that I have for you, Ari, is what you hope viewers walk away with after watching this film?
Yeah, I think the message of the film is all about intergenerational healing. And I think we really need to have these conversations with our family members. They're probably the hardest things we're going to do in our lives. Hands down, these is going to be some of the hardest things we do in our lives, is have really hard conversations with family members. And oftentimes the thing that felt like the hardest thing to say ends up being oh, that was way more bigger in my head than it was in reality. And I think with the conversation with my mom and I had a very particular perspective of it, and she had another one. But even though that was the case, when we ended up talking about it, it was very emotional. And sometimes starting the conversation, it takes time, and it takes many, many conversations to get to a place, but I think people need to hear forgiveness from each other, and people need to forgive each other. And I think that people need to we need these things. And I think when we are able to have them, we feel more full and we feel lighter. The weight that's lifted off of our shoulders is incredible. And so the film is really about, intergenerational healing. And for me, that was not only learning my roots and understanding the bigger picture that I'm a part of, so growing roots and establishing them, but then also getting a very clear idea of what made me me, what shaped my mom, and then how did that shape me? And then the film, not to give away the ending, but part of it is the next generation and how we have a part in what the next generation knows and how they feel being brought up in our families, and then what do we pass on and what do we heal? And so I think the film is really about having that conversation that's hard to have, and taking the time to discover where you come from and how that shaped you. Because I don't think that we can separate ourselves from those things. And sometimes it's a matter of looking, and then for some reason it comes to the next generation to like be the one to say like, hey, let's talk about this, you know.
Right.
But I do know that a few families have told me they've watched the film together, and then that the film gave them permission to start a conversation. Like the film was almost an excuse.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I'm doing is I'm putting the film online over the holidays, because families are going to be together. And so if anybody wants to stream the film between December 13th and the 31st, they can, and then they can show it, and then they can see what naturally comes up. And oftentimes with starting these conversations, you just take one step and then you see what happens. You don't have to know the whole entire conversation, but to get it started, like you can just take one step and see where it leads. I will say it took me 7 years to have that conversation with my mom. So I understand. I understand what this takes, but, and then the conversation her and I had was over in like an hour, you know, so it took 7 years to get there, but then it only lasted an hour, and it was very impactful. Yeah, I do hope people have good conversations about, you know, being missionary kids and are able to talk about what that experience was like for them. I think as many of us know, each member of the family can have a very different experience with growing up in a missionary family, and it's okay for each person to have their experience. So those types of conversations, I hope the film starts.
Well, thank you, Ari. Is there anything coming up that you want our audience to know about?
Yes.
Screenings coming up.
Yeah, thank you. This is something that I really appreciate you guys are giving me an opportunity to share. So we have 3 screenings left this year. And for me, these are my big pitch moments, because these are the biggest screenings that I'm going for. I kind of like put all my money on the line for these final screenings, and I'm pretty excited about them. On October 18th, I will be in DC with Holly Berkeley Fletcher, who just came out with a book called The Missionary Kids. And we have a joint screening at Union Market at 6 p.m. October 18th. And you can find all this information on Eventbrite. So you just type in Ben Between Africa and Eventbrite, and you'll be able to see the tickets. But that's going to be such a great screening. I'm trying really hard to get MKs, TCKs, Peace Corps volunteers to show up, because I think it's going to be an amazing opportunity for people to get to know each other, connect, share stories. It's a multi-day event. Holly will be at the screening with her books. There will be a book signing. Plus, we've rented out a part of the theater so people can congregate after the film and chat. There's going to be a lunch. There's going to be a tour of DC. Like, this is a do not miss experience, and it's like a huge dream of mine to bring people together so they can connect on their shared third culture kid experiences. And then on November 13th, we did another really big like leap for us. We rented out the Museum of Photographic Arts in San Diego. It's a gorgeous museum in Balboa Park, and we rented out the auditorium, and we're going to show 2 films. They're both personal documentaries based on family archives. The other filmmaker, Rachel Elizabeth Seed, is an incredible filmmaker. She has a film called A Photographic Memory. She's winning so many awards. She's being interviewed by everyone. And I feel super honored to share the theater with her. So we're going to have a double screening. She will screen her film first. I'll screen my film second. And then we're going to have a special guest that interviews us on this whole family archive. And like this era of having physical family archives is going to not exist forever. Films are some of the last opportunities we have to really be able to capture them. And then finally, the last screening of the year will be December 13th through the 31st, and it will be a virtual screening. And so all this can be found on Eventbrite, or you can look up Ben Between Africa. My website will come up, and then you can go to the screenings page to buy tickets. And what I would love from this community is I spent the last year and a half doing screenings around the country, but there's all of next year. And so I would really love to hear from people. Where do you think I should go to do screenings? Like, should I come to your community? Can you host me? Like, do you want me to do a virtual screening for your church or your community group? So I need to start planning out the next year. And I really want to know who wants to see this film, where are they, and then how we can come together to make it happen. And if anyone has ideas of like distribution companies that might be interested in a film that covers these topics, I love ideas from the community. I'm open. I want to hear what you guys have. So yeah, so thanks for giving me that platform to put that out there.
Yeah, I love that. I'm an ideas person, so I've already got some things, and I will email you afterwards.
I would love
those
that.
thoughts.
I would love that.
I just think everyone should watch it. There was Juan. We can also put links in the chat, right? So we can.
Yeah, I put the website bendbetweenafrica.com in the chat for people to have access to that.
Okay.
Yeah, and if people want to support the screenings, because this is all grassroots, so the only way that so every single penny that's made off of the screenings goes back to the next screening. So I haven't pocketed any of the money. It all goes to support the next screening. Some screenings are wonderful, and I'm able to like fully fund my travel, and other screenings I pay half out of pocket, and then some of the. So if people want to support, you can email me through my website. And I definitely take contributions, but no, it doesn't go to my pocket. It goes directly to keeping the film alive and keeping the film out in the world. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, thank you. I can't see the chat on mine. Are there any questions that we want to take?
At the moment, no, but maybe as the day goes on, people will jump to questions. But yeah, Ari, thank you so much for being here tonight. Danny, also thank you. We put the information of bendbetweenafrica.com for people to continue to support your work. And is that where people can watch the film as well?
No, for watching the film, go to Eventbrite, and then you can basically reserve your ticket. And then when the film's available, I'll send you a link and a password.
Okay, perfect. Sounds good.
Please do that. Go to Eventbrite, go to the website, and support Ari. Oh.
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you for your time, and hope you guys have a great night.
Thanks, everyone. I super
you.
appreciate it. Have a good night.
Bye-bye.